Alright, first thing I want to do is go over some shape tweening. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and go over to my object create. I'm actually going to start with a circle, which you could just press O to go to the circle tool, but I wanted to make sure my stroke was not there. So now I just have the paint fill, which is fantastic. I'm going to come up here to a few frames later, to frame 10. I'm going to make a keyframe. Could have made a blank keyframe, but whatever. And then I'm going to go back to my rectangle tool, also known as R. I'm going to turn on onion skinning, and I'm going to make a square that fits roughly around the circle. Doesn't have to be perfect. Now, one thing to note with shape tweens, I have had them crash flash several times, so I usually save before I make any shape tween. So I'm going to do that now. And now I've got this nice, neat little shape that goes from a circle to a square. When you click a frame in between the keyframes or a green space on the tween, you do get a few options. Really, you get one option, two options, but this one, I haven't noticed it really do much. You have an ease. You can do an ease in, and what that's going to do is it's going to make it slowly transform in the beginning, and then it'll quickly turn into a square. And you can do the opposite, where it starts fast and ends slow, known as the ease out. And that's really shape tweening in a nutshell. There's not a lot to it. I would recommend, like I said, saving before each one, just to keep it in case it crashes flash. And then also, you want to kind of stay away from doing too many shapes in one shape tween. So if you have too many objects, you'll want to separate them into layers, similar that you have to for symbols. So just keep that in mind. If you're doing a shape tween and it's just not turning out right, and you have too many objects on the layer, just try separating them out and then putting them in their own separate shape tweens. It might help out. And you don't want the shape tween shapes to be too complicated. I mean, obviously, if you're going from a circle to something like this, and then I go to do a shape tween, it's going to do some really weird stuff. So just keep that in mind. Try and keep the shape blends similar. It's not a wizard. It's not going to do the most amazing thing for you. So just keep that in mind. And really, that's pretty much all there is to know about shape tweens. Just keep them simple. And next we have the classic tween. This is the one that you'll probably use the most, because I'm not even going to be going over Motion Tween, because screw that noise. I've tried making it work several times. It either crashes my flash or doesn't do what I really want it to do. And classic tween really works just fine. So let's go ahead and make a shape. I'm going to make a rectangle, or square. And I'm going to go ahead and make it a graphic symbol. I will call it square. And I'm going to put that symbol in another graphic symbol called, I'm going to call it rotating square, because that's what I think I'm going to do with it. And now I'm going to go into that object, and I'm going to give it a little rotating animation. So I made a keyframe at 20. I'm just going to rotate it a little bit, and then create classic tween. Boom, I've already got some movement. If I come back though, can't see anything. If I control enter, can't see anything. If I make this main timeline graphic symbol into a movie clip and then control enter, now I can see movement. Graphic symbols require you to be able to play them on the main timeline, and this is the only way that you can export things for movie, or basically AVI, PNG sequences, images. Those will only export what the main timeline can see. So now I would be able to see it. Before, when it was just a movie clip, I don't see any movement on the main timeline, so every frame would render out as just a flat square. So keep that in mind if you're exporting to an AVI format. So that's the important part to note about graphic symbols. I'm going to go back into my rotation thing, and we're going to go ahead and see what options I have on the tween here. I already have an ease, which is just like the shape tween. I can have an ease in where it starts slow and ends fast. I can do an ease out where it starts fast and ends slow. Or here's where I can get super fancy. I can edit the ease. I can go ahead and reset. And say I wanted it to ease in, I just drag this down. And then say I wanted it to ease out, I just drag that up. Now the tween, it's going to start slow, and then speed up, and then slow down at the top. Hopefully that was easy enough to visualize. And now you can notice that it more smoothly starts and stops. It's a very simple, more elegant rotation. If I go back into this, I can also uncheck use one setting for all properties, because say I was moving the object forward at a different speed, I could uncheck this, and then I could only go to the rotation, and I could set the curve the way I wanted it, and then only the rotation values are going to ease. Everything else will be static. If I had a color option such as alpha, tint, brightness, or whatever the other one is, I could set that to ease in or out. And you can add points in the center. Like if I drag this down and then pull this all the way down, it's going to be like, say this was an alpha, and here it was at, fully opaque. You could see it, and then it was going to transition into being alpha'd out at 0. It would play up to frame 10 before it actually started to fade out if I made the curve like this. And I could actually just go ahead and prove that by changing this alpha to 0. Now we'll come back and oh, look at that. It stays, and then right there it starts to ease out. And I didn't have to add an extra keyframe for that. That was all just controlled with this little doohickey. So you can do some pretty fancy things with the eases. I'd very much recommend you learn it. It's very helpful. And so now I'm actually going to remove that tween, and I'm going to clear this keyframe so that I have nothing there. But then I'm going to remake my keyframe so that my first frame and my last frame are identical. And then I'm going to add the classic keyframe again. My ease is back to normal. And now we have this fancy rotate option, which I'm going to go ahead and set it to clockwise. Now I'm going to get this constant rotating movement. I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to pull this side out just so you can see a little clearer. Sometimes it moves a little fast, but it's very clearly rotating in one direction. I can click on this tween again, and I can do counterclockwise to have it go backwards. And I can change how much I want it to rotate. So if I wanted it to rotate twice, I could tell it. There's one thing to note. I'm going to change it back to 1 so that it doesn't go too crazy. If you have it set to 1 and your end keyframe is not identical to your first keyframe, then the tween is always going to make sure that it rotates at least once, and then it'll rotate again around to your point. So that's what that 1 means. It's going to rotate at least that many times before it goes to that ending keyframe. If you want it to only rotate, less than a full circle, not quite a full circle, I mean, you could set this to 0. And now it'll go all the way around in the direction you want it, but it'll stop at that rotation that you told it to stop at. So that's very good to know. For things where the arms might do something a little wonky, you can basically specify which direction you want it to rotate in, and that can be helpful during big random motions, because Flash just tries to figure out the shortest possible position. Like you can see, if I get rid of this and just turn it to auto, it's just tilting down. That's useless to me if I wanted it to go all the way around backwards, so I could just tell it to counterclockwise 0 times. And it'll just be like, alright, I'm going to rotate this way until I hit my keyframe. And that's all that is. So that's good to know. Next you have these little options down here. These are for animation guides, which I'll be making a separate video for those, so you don't really need to worry about those. And same with sync and scale. Scale's obviously for scaling the object as a tween, which you usually want to leave that on. Sync, however, sync is only important really for graphic symbols, because if I come down here, say I was animating this in the main timeline, which let's just go ahead and do that. I'm going to pull this over here. I'm going to make a keyframe where I have it move over here. And then I'm going to make my classic tween. So it moves over, and the object rotates perfectly fine. And if I click this tween, sync is not active. So remember that. Now, say I wanted this to dip down while it rotated over. I'm going to make a keyframe, then I'm going to dip it down. It looks fine, right? Still dips down. Well, maybe I want the dip to happen a little faster, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull this keyframe that I made over a little bit. So now I'm doing that. Ooh, look at that pop. What's happening is, when I made this keyframe, it was originally on frame 10, and when I click the object I can see looping, it's looping on frame 10. So, and when I pulled it over here to frame 6, it still thinks it's looping on frame 10. I can manually change each keyframe to match whatever it needs to be to get my smooth motion. Or, if I just go ahead and delete this, select my tween that goes all the way through everything and select sync, I can then make my keyframe, move it down like I wanted, still works perfectly fine, and then I can drag this keyframe back to 6 again, and it's going to automatically adjust itself. And this only matters for graphic symbols, because like I said, graphic symbols rely heavily on the main timeline. Movie clips don't really give a crap, they're just going to go. So that's pretty much classic tweens in a nutshell. But things to note, really would just be one object per tween, so one object per layer, because I can show you what will happen the second I add more. I'm actually going to delete this tween for this example, and then I'm going to hold Alt and click and drag, and it's going to copy the objects. Now I have 2 of these objects on this one layer, and then say I make this keyframe here, and I want this one to go here and this one to go here. I'm going to hit create classic tween, and it's not quite going to do what we want. Flash doesn't know how to deal with that. And what's actually happening now is it's going to make 2 tween objects, because it's treating them now as if this is an object and then this is an object. It's not at all what we want. It will not work. You can undo it all you want. It'll still keep the tween objects in your library, so I can just go ahead and delete that. If you have your objects all on one layer, you can right-click them, select them first, then right-click them, distribute to layers, and it'll automatically populate them to layers, and it'll name them whatever their symbol's named. Then I can come over here, I can make my keyframes by pressing F6, I can move them where I want, then I can make my classic tween, and then they go up. And a quick way to edit tweens is just select the frames where you want a tween. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to include at least one frame on the layer that you want to have the tween. Then you can right click, create classic, and it'll add it for both. Same for editing eases, it'll do it for whatever tweens are currently selected. And that means if you were selecting odd stuff like that, you just wanted the tweens to match, you could do that. And I believe the same could be said for when you wanted to resync a tween. That should work. And that's the tweens in a nutshell. Motion tweens are a completely different beast. Their usefulness has not been revealed to me. It seems very buggy. The interface is just not there yet. Maybe it is in newer versions. I'm using 5.5. In most cases, I'm pretty sure you're going to get by okay with just a classic Tween. Works pretty good. Thanks for watching.